Gladiators in their arenas of blood and sand are a strangely underdone setting in video games. They feel tailor-made for the medium and can accommodate basically any game genre. From an RPG, to a tactical game, to a business sim, to a battle royale, to a fighting game. Gladiators tend to get relegated to just side modes or minor factions in video games. They're rarely given the central spotlight. It's weird, right? The setting clearly grips people, and I think it's safe to say that everyone knows what a gladiator is. Live-action stories that have adapted gladiators have been successful. From Ridley Scott's Gladiator to the underrated Spartacus TV series to the original Stanley Kubrick Spartacus. And yet, gladiators have been mostly abandoned past the early 2000s boom of epics and classical settings. There have been good gladiator games. Colosseum Road to Freedom is one of my favorites. I actually replayed it to completion last year. Colosseum fulfilled that gladiator fantasy in a way that no other game had, both for younger me and for adult me. And yet, still after I beat it, I craved more gladiator action. I could have rewatched the Spartacus show for the 30th time, but instead, I bought the game We Who Are About to Die. And I am more than happy to tell you, it has fulfilled my want of another gladiator game near flawlessly. It is easily the best gladiator simulation since Colosseum released back in 2005. We Who Are About to Die is an endless game full of an endless amount of possibilities. Or, well, as endless as possibilities within an arena can be. And though it is near infinite, there are still defined goals and endpoints if you wish to take them. It is a one-life roguelike. That one life for your character can last you an 18-hour playthrough or a single 2-minute match. And while losing a character can be disheartening, there is more than enough in place to make you not mad at the game for it, but actually motivated and nearly happy to be in the shoes of another character, so that you can repeat the process of building them up again. Death is punishing, but not a soul-crushing punishing. And death doesn't mean that you've completely lost everything. A character who completes their origin goal unlocks permanent bonuses for every character after them. And even characters who die prematurely can invest gold, fame, and even an heirloom item to the next gladiator. Plus, you, the player, get experience in how to use certain weapons and armor and shields. Even beyond the technical bonuses, getting a new character means you get to experiment with origins, systems, weapons, and armor that you never used before. This game has no pre-made story. However, it is an expert at making dynamic stories, somewhat similar to Mount & Blade, Kenshi, and Crusader Kings. You become attached to this little weirdo of yours with strangely gelatin-like bones. Maybe you start thinking of what their persona is, what they're known for. Maybe you end up using a weapon you never thought that you'd like playing with, but find that once you pick it up, you're actually pretty good with it, and the crowd loves it too. Maybe you buy a mask from the merchant and that becomes their in-arena persona. Maybe you appeal to one patron over the other due to their morals and station in life, or even due to your origin. Just sprinkle a bit of your own imagination into it and use the game systems to make some fun stories. It's a really addicting loop to see how far you can go, what new weapons, armor, or gameplay changes you'll encounter, and each origin having a defining endpoint and goal means that your playthrough can be super different. From reaching a certain fame rank to killing a certain amount of gladiators to getting a certain amount of money. That means your style of fighting may change. You may prioritize things you never did before. One character may blow money in pursuit of fame and glory. Another may be a penny pincher, who only scavenges from fights and keeps bad items till they break. Characters' beginning stats can wildly change your gameplay. Someone with low max health but high max stamina may skirt around the edge of the arena, letting the other fighters take each other on, only ducking into the fight to finish off wounded people with a backstab. Or be the opposite. A heavily armored tank with lots of health rushing in, swinging at whoever dares get in their way. But in return, they get easily winded from low stamina. A plague may happen, making the physician unavailable, making you want to conserve your health in fights more. Or you may piss off a certain runner of the games who will rig this week's games to be harder for you, etc. I do think there needs to be more of these events added eventually, as I believe I've encountered just about all of them 20 hours in. Although this game is in early access, so I assume more being added eventually is planned. The gameplay is great. I will admit the default camera I couldn't grasp, so I highly recommend that you tap that key to switch it to third person, at least for beginners. Fighting is very similar to Mount & Blade, though there is some Mordhound Exanima in there too. You have directional base attacks and can hold and drag to do higher damage. When you hold your attack, your weapon stays in place, and you see a little line drawn on screen. When you release it, you swing it with your mouse, your speed, stamina, and their armor movements all change the way the weapon impacts. It makes the hits feel substantial and weighty, like flicking your mouse around as a 1-to-1 for swinging the sword. I joked earlier about the bendy bones, but honestly the exaggerated way that bodies can move in this game really gets across the hard impact. We finally found the deep lore for QWOP. Before running on tracks, they fought in arenas. Anyways, just like the impact feels good and identifiable, the opposite is true. When you pitifully and slowly drag a sword's non-sharp side against someone's body, it gets across your bad stamina and lack of power really well. You aren't just being told by a number that you fizzled the attack, you can see and feel in every way that it wasn't good. And when your attack angle fails, it makes you fix your targeting and try and hit the enemy from another side. Their legs, other arm, head, try and find the weak points. You learn through your own actions and their visuals where to target and what type types of attacks work. The ragdolls, like I've mentioned, are exaggerated but fun. Burst out laughing a few times now due to a body going flying further away than I thought it could. And the gore is pretty good. It's like blood and gore is a must for Gladiator games. Decapitations, cutting someone in half. Feels good to pull them off in this game. Though in the future, as crazy as I sound suggesting this, I'd like there to be more blood and viscera. As right now, it feels like you're just popping off a Lego's body part. The weapons also all play differently. This is one of the few games I've seen that have spears actually feel distinct, being able to stab up and over shields. Likewise, axes break open shields with hefty hard swings. Flails are volatile and highly dangerous. Swords vary, mostly due to their weight and length, making even sub-variations of swords distinct. There are also hand scissors and maces, war picks, great swords, polearms, and even more. In a lot of games, they make the mistake of every single similarly sized weapon feeling the same, but that's not the case here. You can really tell the difference from a wasp-like fast short sword to a larger and heavier one that swings and hits like a battering ram. Even two swords very close in length to each other feel distinct. It's awesome. I already mentioned before that in between games you get encounters, but you can also do a decent bit more. You can go shopping, buy some stuff, sell some stuff, reroll your options, ask the merchant to hold on to some merchandise for you, repair items, get fame and gold from exchanging one for the other, train, unlock perks by spending fame and gold. Oh, and those perks can be anything from better shop options to edges in certain fights. There's also an affinity system, with a set of different hosts of the game. But to be honest, I didn't get their importance. They gain and lose affinity depending on what types of fight you go in and who is hosting them. I think maybe it just changes your pay from said host, and also influence some random encounters, and, well, you need high affinity from certain origin goals. I have to admit, at first I wasn't a fan of the art style. I went into the game believing I prefer a bit of a darker and more grounded aesthetic. But playing the game regularly, the style surprisingly works and, well, is really pretty. I wouldn't want it changed much from what it is now to the end of early access, aside from some refinements and additions that come with development. The style gives it its own distinct world and space and keeps the mood lighter. I worry that if it was depressingly realistic and dark, the fun loop may feel more visceral and cruel. The variety and aesthetic inspiration is also great. We have the expected Roman stuff, there's also Greek, Byzantine, Persian, African, vaguely East Asian, and even early medieval Europe with stuff like plate armor and weapons like the bardiche. By the way, I pronounced it bardiche for so long, but I guess that's wrong? Tangent aside, variety is much needed in games like this, where the only real variety you can get is in aesthetics and weapon and armor types. The arena venues are also greatly varied. The before-mentioned Colosseum Road to Freedom only had 2 arenas, 3 if you count the one that appears in the tutorial and side modes. This game has a lot. I'm not even sure of the number, and hell, even within those arenas, variations can occur, with traps added at different platforms, debris and items spread around. From brawling in muddy pits, small and large, to dueling in personal noble villas and mansions, to city squares, the classic sand-filled arena, to a theater, to a regal marble arena, to a Saw movie-esque trapped nightmare. The audio for this game is very good too. Super subtle, but good. Weapons hitting different areas feel distinct and varied. You can tell just by the audio where you hit, whether it be due to the slight chink of metal or the meaty smack if you hit an exposed body part. The music too is subtle, but fits. Feels diegetic, like there are people performing in the game world to accentuate the arena's action. Mostly building music like drums, and they never interfere with the audio sphere. The sound of the battle always takes precedence. It helps hype you up, keep you focused, and even a little anxious with the building intensity. The most important sound that keeps you tied to the fight, though, is the sounds of the crowd. They are majorly important and feel truly dynamic. The meter and their reactions to your actions make you want them to like you. It helps that the public favor meter in the bottom right actually matters and makes sense. You can tell what stage of approval you're at just from the audio, from mostly silent to clapping to thunderous cheering and even to booing and throwing rotten food. While Colosseum Road to Freedom is a great game, public favor mechanic was just completely broken and made no sense. So it's honestly so satisfying and a wish come true to play a Gladiator game and have that mechanic actually work and feel like an integral part of the game. There aren't many flaws or bugs, but I will mention a few here, as well as some of my wishes for what the game can can add in the future. To start, I've crashed 3 times in 20-ish hours of gameplay. Though each time it happened, the game was an expert at recovering that save file. I have no lost progress, no character count is dead, I'm just back into the fight with all the character info as it was, and it's great. I've not had any bugs with the menus or general fighting, but I swear that hand scissor and the scythe flail thing need to be nerfed. They hit super hard, even in the best of armor. Anytime I see them, I fear for my life. I've even seen them as early as the second week. Now on to nitpicks and wants. The cloak and clothes physics need some work. Longer cloaks especially just don't work and look bad. They clip constantly and just don't move well. As I mentioned earlier, patrons need more to them. We need more events and more reasons to want to appeal to one over the other. They each have an implied character, and I think that more unique encounters with them between fights could really help with making encounters, as well as the patrons, more entertaining. Likewise, I think implementing a unique enemy gladiator system would work. So too with adding factions. Every combatant already has a randomized name. You can see it if you lock onto them in the fight. To have them build up with us and see them carried into fights each week to the next, or even just unique legendary famous warriors for us to fight and harder unique boss fights. Factions too could be interesting. It would make fighting certain teams feel more distinct, and tie the factions into the patrons. But that's just my far-flung ideas. I'm not a game developer. Some of these ones are super advanced, and I can't request someone to make a AAA Nemesis system in their game. You have a great thing here, Jordy. I trust you to keep doing it well. Oh, also, in case I haven't mentioned it yet, this game was made by a passionate solo dev. A single person did all of this. If that isn't amazing and inspiring, I don't know what is. Oh, and Jordy, if you're watching, one wish from me. Add dual wielding, please. I want to live out my Spartacus and Gannicus fantasies. And I know that you've got to like Spartacus too. I mean, come on, you're making a Gladiator game. This is a great game. Even if this wasn't its full release date, I think it's worth it at the price point. It's a great game right now, and I believe that in time it could be the perfect Gladiator game. If you're worried about buying an early access game for lack of content, I will confidently say there is more than enough content right now to justify buying it if you like the game's concept. It's not even close to being describable as bare bones. It's pretty meaty. At this point, I think we're just relaxing with an already fun game and waiting for more and more content updates. I recommend it, for sure. This is the end of the review section of the video. I appreciate you popping in. I hope the video was helpful for you. The video from this point on will actually be a demonstration of this game's gameplay and its dynamic role-playing storytelling potential. I'll be recounting the story of a character that I played for this video, from beginning to end, role-playing his life and situation with some minor inputs from me and things like flavor text to his background and opinions. But overall, I used the limitations of the game to tell the story. I went in with no character plan and let the randomizer work its magic, and we began from there. Whether or not this gladiator survives or succeeds, we'll have to watch and see. So, let's begin with a tale of blood and sand. Aguron Faragrin, better known as Grin, was a former soldier and a simple man. He fought in many campaigns and amassed a decent amount of money, but he had pissed the coin away slowly but surely in the years that followed, on failed business ventures mostly. He was an approachable man, he wasn't named Grin for nothing. It also meant that he had everyone approach him, including scammers and desperate merchants. Even his loot, taken from war, broke over time. He found himself assailed by bandits when he was on the edge of the empire or in the alleyways of the capital. And to be honest, what little he had left was lost in simple gambling. First on dice, on horses and chariots, and then on gladiators. As Grin entered his older years, he knew he had little time left to earn the coin for a proper retirement. His stamina was diminished from one too many lazy a day and far too many a cup of wine, but his health and talent was still in him, if rusty. So one day, he dusted off what bits of armor he had left, tarnished but still usable, and looked around for a weapon. His beloved greatsword was long left destroyed in the forest of the north, but he figured the thick branch he had used for his broomstick would work, if he polished it some and wrapped the grip. And so, he went to a gladiator school, grinning and whistling in line even when he offered his services. Contract was signed right away. He would fight with that school until 100,000 coins were earned in fights. When the money was earned, he would leave and retire with several chests full of money. When the contract was stamped and filed away, Grin asked the notary one simple question: when do I fight? And, later that day, at his own insistence, he'd have his first bout, a duel. His return to fighting was not as magnificent as he had hoped. It was a last-minute fight in the center of a trading market, to settle the dispute of two patrons. He was up against another former soldier, his equipment a lot nicer than Grin's. A metal helmet, a short sword and shield, but Grin still felt confident. He entered as it began to rain and they fought in the mud. His wooden club hit the man over and over, but Grin felt he was making no headway. Even with Grin's barbaric strength, he felt like nothing was happening, and when his club broke over the man's shoulder, he worried it was time for his death. But But then he noticed. A spectator had thrown a mace into the arena. He rushed to it, and the brawl continued, long and bloody. But the crowd seemed strangely mesmerized by these two old veterans fighting with all they had. Even the two nobles who had arranged it watched in silent shock, side by side, their dispute forgotten for just a moment. Finally, using the mace he had taken from a bystander, and picking up his opponent's shield, Grin killed the other veteran, with a brutal crash against his chest. Once armored, but now completely caved in. After the fight, he was paid. He had to return the mace and shield, so he was now worryingly unarmed. When Grin visited the merchant the next day, there was a sword that Grin liked quite a bit, a long and one-handed thing. Grin would have preferred a bastard sword or a greatsword, but this would do for now. It was definitely an improvement over his old club, even when it was whole. But buying it meant he had earned basically nothing from the previous fight. But he had gained something. Something inside of him reignited fighting that old veteran. Was it pity? Disgust? No. Killing the fellow veteran didn't matter much to him. They both had signed up for this, and he was just trying as much to kill Grin as Grin was trying to kill him. So, Grin identified over a cup of wine that feeling was excitement and giddiness, something he hadn't felt since his days of the war. He kept training until the next week. His main exercise then was helping him build a bathhouse. He worked as well as all the others there, and never too much to exert himself. Likewise, he never rested or had water till the others did so. This made those in town start to like him more, seeing the humble ex-soldier turned gladiator working with the slaves and masons alike. The second fight, he had his pick of venue. He decided on a 5-man free-for-all. The school warned him that his opponents were a few ranks higher than him, but he grinned and shrugged it off, saying it paid the most, so it was the one that he'd go for. And so, he entered. Due to the uneven number of fighters, the other 4 had already paired off in 2 different duels. Grin, not wanting to stand by, forced himself into one of them, swinging at 2 men wearing muzzles, the muzzles clearly identifying them as violent criminals. He fought against them, all 3 of them changing targets constantly to hit the other. And before he knew it, he had killed both. Both killing strokes done by him. His heart was pounding and his body couldn't keep up. So, he rested on the sidelines for a moment. 2 kills seemed more than enough for what he figured would be needed for approval, but to his surprise, the crowd began booing at him. So, not having that, he continued on. He rushed against the other 2, dressed like thrill-seeking civilians signed up for a fight for fame. He took them both on as well, and when they fell to him, the crowd couldn't help but cheer even louder. All 4 other combatants were killed by him personally, and he couldn't stop pride building up within him. He bought a shield after the fight, again basically making him back to square one in terms of money. He needed higher paying bouts to start making progress on his retirement, or maybe to stop after buying equipment for a while. But the shield was needed, he knew that. He went into the battle, and squared off against a bare-chested man with a helmet. He thought this combination was strange, and felt the chest was an obvious disadvantage. And when he cut the man in 2, he believed that his assessment was right. He took on 2 more men in fights, dodging in and out until they too fell to his blade. Then he faced off against a man who looked like a disenfranchised architect. Grin took his head. As a final moment, he took on another shirtless man, splitting him in 2 just like the last. The crowd cheered. They had loved him the entire fight, and he had loved hearing them. His tenacity for the crowd had cost him. He had taken many wounds and he limped from the arena, grinning up that cheering crowd. That week, the market went up in price due to the war's strains on fighting goods. It didn't matter to Grin, though, as he had to spend all his money on wounds again. Damn it, Grin, he told himself. Stop pushing yourself into the fights. Do the bare minimum. Survive, get the money, get out of here. But, as he lay in bed, that horrible medicine making him nauseous and his many cuts and wounds pulsed with pain, he kept dreaming of the next fight. He entered a group fight, in the same market square his first duel had been in. He was surprised that they were able to fit so many gladiators into such a small space. And, with a new addition, traps in the center. As he fought, he began to panic as his teammates scattered. When fighting in teams, he was used to being in an organized group like in the Legion, but here it was scattered. The rain and night disoriented him, as well as the 2 torches of the enemy blinding him as he dueled. He killed an enemy, their torch falling to the ground, and a spear came flying at him as he squared off another combatant, this one wielding a great club. It hit him hard, knocking the breath out of him, but Grin prevailed over it too. When he looked up from the corpse, exhausted from the fight, he saw one more teammate of his alive, squaring off against a trident bearer, and so he ran to them to join. His first few swings pitifully weak. When he gathered himself, he cut the man's head off. In a brief burst of adrenaline, he ran along the edges of the square, screaming in blood fury to the crowd. When all was said and done, he passed out in the carriage ride back home. He learned his sword had taken a massive crack during the fight, so he had to pay immediately for it to be fixed, or it may break. In good news, he was offered another reward along with his coin. A better greave was gifted to him. It was new and polished compared to his old one. He took it gladly, and again spent most of the week in bed recovering. His coin again spent on medicines and doctors. By now, weeks into his lifestyle, his mind went away from the goal of his money and retiring. Instead, he knew what he truly wanted to do in the twilight of his years. He wanted to keep fighting. He wanted the exhilarating fights in the arena, nothing like being in the shield wall of the army. This was glory. This was fame. They cheered for him. They loved him and he was good. Every fight he had been in, he had vanquished the enemy. He imagined they talked in the lower tiers of the arena about him. Grin, the once soldier, now gladiator who kills all his other enemies alone. He saw there was an opening for a fight of 1 versus 4 others. It paid more than any other match he had seen, nearly 4,000 coins. In addition, he could take any equipment that he wished off of the dead, but he knew he wasn't ready for a fight like that yet. Yes, he was known for killing many others alone, but they had distractions, other people moving around, not just a single target. But Mai was tempting to him, both for the coin and equipment, but even more importantly for the glory and exhilaration of just doing it. Instead, he entered the third highest paying fight, a large group battle of 8 versus 8. He rushed in, immediately choosing a target. This group was the first one that he had seen that were properly outfitted and cohesive, in similar uniforms and armor. With his first opponent, he slashed their armor off, their now bare chests severed in half. He immediately took on another, his hefty swings cutting another in half, another one's head off. He killed another as he ran to the last gladiator, a single man taking on 4 at once. When this man killed one of them, it frightened Grin. This opponent just kept hitting them and blocking, slowly degrading their numbers and health. Grin backed away. Was this how his enemies felt when he resisted their numbers? How the crowd felt? They cheered for this man now instead of him. Every hit done against Grin, they cheered for. Would this man kill Grin? Take their favor? No. No, he couldn't let that happen. He went back in. With his teammates, they felled the man with desperate attacks. Grin walked out, not as happy in his victories as he had been all the other times. He felt the crowd had turned on him for another, and rather than being mad at them, he was mad at himself. He had to become better to keep them. The gods seemed on his side as he returned, as he was given 2 hefty donations of nearly 4,000 coins from a local noble family, as well as a guild, since they believed in his potential. He spent a lot of it on the medic, but he had some money left over. As he pursued the merchant's wares, he saw it, the perfect weapon for him. An iron greatsword, a daka, so close to his old one. He wanted it, but it was just out of his reach. 6,700. He only had 4,100. He asked the merchant to hold on to it, promising him he'd make it worth his while. And to his relief, the merchant agreed with a grin. He had 1 match to make up the coin. He could enter a duel and have just enough. So, he did. He entered the duel. The other man a mountain, a closed-face helmet equipped, and a huge club in his hands. Grin found himself running out of breath often, the man reacting to his hits like a wall. Finally, he killed him after getting so many bruises on his body from that massive club. He swore that he was going to die. He returned, hurt, but with the coin to the merchant. And as the sword was brought up by the merchant to the now wounded Grin, he smiled and said, "It was 8,100 now." Grin wanted to punch the man, but with the greatsword, he did not need his shield or one-handed sword anymore. So he sold them to make up the difference, and found he still needed a little bit more. So he sold his other greave, the old one, and bought the greatsword. No money in his pockets were left, but he felt whole again with the greatsword on his back. 19 coins were left to his name. Far less than he had when he entered the arena, but with his greatsword he'd earn even more. It was an investment, he told himself. Returning to the arena, he felt beaten and battered, but he still showed, entering a 7 versus 7 team fight. As he held his greatsword up to the crowd, Grin grinned, ready to show the crowd what he could do now. This fight was in the pit, newly built massive platforms and traps across it, forcing fights either near the traps or in small choke points. Not ideal territory for his greatsword, but still he entered, assured of his victory. The fight was chaotic from the start. Traps set off hitting nearly a dozen people. Bodies flashed by. One moment he was around 4 of his teammates, the next he was surrounded by the enemy. He swung wildly, not even sure who his swings were hitting. He was pushed and squeezed, scratched and slashed. Once he saw a man go flying when he swung his sword. And finally, the huge group dispersed. Smaller fights happened across the whole pit. He took several on, cutting their heads off and slicing the others as he passed them. The fight was over before he knew it. It was easily the most chaotic fight he'd been in, and he had barely survived again. Each fight he felt was hurting his old bones more and more, but this was the closest to death that he had gotten. A fever gripped him the following week, but again he was given a donation, a sizable one by his school. With it, he bought the medic, and in one moment he had plenty of coin, but by the next the doctor had drained his funds, down to 395 coins again. How was he supposed to make money in these fights? He wasn't even fully healed with all his money gone, but he had to fight to earn more. He entered another group fight. He was getting used to them now. The pit was blessedly absent this time of traps and platforms. He won, and he won again. Desperate fight after desperate fight. His life so close to being taken each time. Spears thrown into him, swords slicing his flesh. But all he cared about was the thrill of the deaths he caused and the cheers of the crowd. He found that he only grinned now when he was in the arena, or talking about it. He spent all his coin in the medic again, and what was left he betted with. But he cared not. He cared only for the fight. His chest armor had broken off during a fight, but he bought some replacement armor from the merchant with what little coin he had left. He could tell from the stench that this armor was taken from a corpse, a veteran like him wearing their old Legion armor. It fitted him mostly right. Most armor in the Legion was made munition style, one size fits all. When it came time to fight, he chose a category he had never done before, a luck of the draw match. All combatants go in without weapons, and have to scavenge for them on the battle. He loved his greatsword, but this fight was promising pay over twice any other fight that was available, and he was burning money. He wanted better armor instead of this corpse trap, so he joined. For the first time, he fought in a different arena, instead of in the streets, pits, or villas. He fought in a gorgeous venue, the Lion's Roar. Greenery and fine buildings all around. He grinned as he entered. The rich folk, politicians and commanders watched him now. Maybe he'd get a donation from them, this time from someone with endless pockets. Grin rushed in, grabbing a mace very similar to the one that had saved him way back in his first arena match. Later he found a shield. He went behind the enemy, smashing them with hits, attracting one off to a duel. He was handling himself until a second joined. They kept on him, hitting him every time he swung. He found himself overwhelmed. He started walking backwards towards his allies, hoping one would rush in to help. When he swung, he made no progress. The bodies just on top of him, unable to fully swing his arm. When finally an ally did come in, taking the big one away, he kept fighting the other combatant, who was also wielding a mace. Before he could finish that fight, though, the big man rejoined, and both turned to him. And as he retreated, exhausted, his shield was held up, and he could barely muster pitiful swipes. His strength failed him. His tired and bruised body lowered his shield. Just as it fell, the big Gladiator's maul hit him hard in the chest, just over the heart, and it sent Grin's body up into the air and down into the dirt. His chest was caved in. Grin died in the Lion's War arena. He had hoped the last cheering he would hear was for him. Didn't the sound of the crowd sound pretty similar to the sound of a lion? Grin had never heard one, though, but he liked to imagine that it was anyway. As these thoughts seized him and wishes were lost as the crowd quickly forgot him, Grin grinned into nothingness. Thanks for watching. This is my first review-style video over my larger analysis stuff, and I hope it was helpful to you. If you liked it, let me know down below. I didn't want to do a simple, straightforward review. I want to add my own twist on it, and I'm a role player at heart, and adore the stories dynamic freeform games like this can tell. I fully believe that D&D-esque freeform storytelling can happen in games, even one to the limits. I play D&D weekly, always as the DM. I love just finding stories and making them. If you just immerse yourself and pick the right game, you can do it. It's great fun. Anyways, thanks again for watching. Please comment below and let me know what you think of this video and the format. I really appreciate that. And please like, subscribe, and all that jazz. If you liked my stuff a lot, please consider my Patreon as well. And if you're interested, check out my other content. Thanks again. This was your resident Eccentric, and farewell.